It's always a privilege to get to stand up at World Revival Church. You always got to watch it, though. Pastor Steve will preach your message before you get a chance. It's not uncommon for it to happen, or at least parts of it. And, he hit a little bit of what I was going to try to talk about today. That's all right. It's all right. I'm so glad you're here. This is kind of an unusual service, right? I mean, it's kind of like Christmas, yeah! New Year's, yeah! What's today? It's like that world in between, right? The kids now are kind of got that post-Christmas stupor, all their packages are open, and, you've tried to find all the batteries, and you don't have enough, and it's kind of that middle point, now it's just winter, but never Christmas, right? It's not quite that thing we're looking forward to, and people are, getting ready to, write out their New Year's resolutions, maybe, and, it's exciting. Everybody's looking forward to 2020 being thrown in the trash can, and they're wanting the 2021, and they're excited about that, But here we are. We're still in 2020. Kind of stuck between two seasons, between what is and what's to come. That's pretty good. Yeah, thanks. A little better mix. Thank you. How many of you like being stuck in the middle? Who has ever been like on the middle of an airplane, had to sit in the middle seat? You're sitting there and you're praying that the next person coming won't stink, right? You sit there and somebody, when you're in the middle, you're supposed to at least get the armrest, right? But then some guy comes over and puts his arms up there and you can't even fit in the thing. Nobody likes being in the middle. Middle seasons are rough. I can tell you when you're writing a book, the hardest part's the middle. You got excited about it. You're writing it, and you kind of imagine how it's going to end, but now you've got this middle that's stuck. I thought I was going to like this wireless thing. It's popping off my ear. Eric and I got pretty good size ears, but I got one laugh out of that. Thank you, whoever gave that to me. Pastor Eric and I, they say that ears and noses don't stop growing as you age. I'm like, thanks, Lord. Appreciate that. Stuck in the middle. People don't like middles. People love getting started. People love finishing, but they hate being in the middle. The middle is where so many people give up and walk away. It's too hard. Costs too much. It's going to take too much time. I've noticed it happens with marriages too. You get somebody and they're newly married and they're all happy. Talk to somebody who's been married about 5, 6, 7 years. It's like, I'm telling you, it gets better. That middle can get a little rough. Those middle seasons are a challenge. Who am I? What am I going to do? Where am I going to be? The second act is always a challenge. Movies a lot of times have 3 acts. The first act, they introduce the characters and we, discover what's going on. But the second act is when things get hard. And everybody loves the third act when everything's resolved and there's beauty and goodness and joy. But that second act is hard. I guess I'm a little bit strange, but sometimes I actually like movies that are the second act. I'm probably one of the only people in this room here, but I like, in the Star Wars movies, I like The Empire Strikes Back. It's like, well, that's not a good one. The enemy kind of comes in and it's tough. And I go, yeah, but the tensions are rising and there's hope ahead and, and it's not there yet, but it's going to come and you can kind of feel the stakes. I also like the second film in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Two Towers. And sometimes in the middle act is when it gets hard, when maybe there's been some seasons of victory and breakthrough, but now the enemy is pressing in greater measure. And now the stakes are rising. And usually it feels like there's so much going on that how could we ever win? How could we ever triumph? And in that particular movie series, it looks like they're going to be defeated. There's all these evil creatures coming and marching. And the guy who wrote this was a Christian. And, he's trying to explain the battle between good and evil And in that particular film, it feels like evil is getting some traction. It feels like things are going to be lost. A few years ago, I got to take my daughter to Comic-Con here in Kansas City, and I got to meet one of the main actors from that Lord of the Rings film, Sean Astin. And she got to talk with him some, and I found out that he's actually a Christian. And when we talked with him, we got to talk about Jesus and everything. But I talked to him about how much I enjoyed that movie, and particularly one of the last scenes of the film is his scene, and he gives the speech. And so I was talking to him about it. I said, I really like that scene. That's a really great scene. And he said, well, we didn't film that scene originally. He said, 9/11 hit when we finished filming it, and we haven't released the movie yet. So we actually went back and filmed that scene after 9/11 because we had a nation of people who were in the midst of great trial and turmoil. And it felt like darkness was winning. And so we went and filmed the scene where he gave the speech. And then he began to recite for me the speech. He had it memorized. It was a great moment. Here's what he said. He repeated this scene. I want to share it with you here. He said, this was a speech in the movie. It's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here. But we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, the shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. They meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know why. Folks in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, but they didn't because they were holding on to something. That's a great moment. He shared that little speech with me, and I smiled, and I love that scene. And, you know, in that film, it's difficult. Evil is marching. They're going to destroy the city of the kings. The heroes have got their backs to the wall. Some have even died. How could they ever prevail? How could they ever stand? It's difficult sometimes. You know, it's fun to watch other characters living the second act because we've got a lot of hope that good things are going to come. But what happens when you're in the second act? When we're watching the movies and they're in the middle of the second act, we're glued to the seat. We can feel the tension. We can feel the energy. We can feel the drama, like, yeah. But when we're living the second act, it's not easy always. When we look around us and we see trouble and we see darkness and we see evil, and then sometimes we even see things that happen that should have never happened, losses that should have never come along the way. I have to say, it feels like our world over this year has been in the second act. You know, I feel like, I know others have felt like this too, that God has intended and God has desired for there to be an outpouring of glory on our nation. There are things spoken over Kansas City that God was going to begin to do powerful things in our city. And I believe that. But sometimes it seems that the enemy wants to sideline, hinder, hurt, stop, discourage, and undermine people on their way to glory. And sometimes we find ourselves in a brutal and difficult second act. And the question is, how are we going to continue on? How are we going to see? How are we going to process what we're dealing with? So here's the thing about most great movies, and in the Bible too, is that how you respond in the second act determines how the story ends. How you respond in the face of evil and crisis and challenge and fear will determine where you stand in the end. It's time for us to begin to process what it means to live right now and be positioned to actually move forward. I really believe that. You say, well, Pastor JD, what are you talking about? I don't get this. What does this have to do with the Bible? It has everything to do with the Bible. Because the people in the Bible lived in similar kinds of circumstances. They walked through similar things. Sometimes when we read the Bible, we imagine that they just walked and everything always worked out for them. You know, my daughter talked to me recently, and she said, Dad, why our missionary friend Cliff Pash, died in the holiday time a few years ago. She said, Dad, why did Cliff die? He was a good man. He was a missionary. He loved people. He took care of people. God's anointing was all over him. Why did he die? And I said, honey, I don't know. I don't understand sometimes why difficult things happen. I don't know why the enemy rises up. I don't know why troubling seasons come. I don't know why sometimes we feel like our backs are against the wall. And it doesn't quite fit the story that we have imagined. It doesn't quite fit what we had hoped. But today I'm going to ask you, can we learn something from the people of the Bible who went through similar things? I think so. Is there a way for us to make it forward in our second act? And I believe there is. So if you got a Bible, please turn with me to Acts chapter 12. Verse 1 is where we're going to start. We're starting this story kind of in the middle of the story, if you will, because we've just passed a bunch of really good things. Just a few chapters back, you can see Peter preaching to Cornelius and the power of the Holy Spirit falling down on a bunch of Gentiles. They're speaking in tongues. And there's this expansion of the gospel, and there's people being saved. This is a season of revival and glory. And they're imagining everything is going to continue forward just the way it had. But the enemy has a way of wanting to sometimes stop the momentum, stop the progress, stop the success of good things and good people. And sometimes it catches us unexpected. Chapter 12, verse 1, it says, about that time, about the time of what? Of revival, power, might, goodness, success. About that time, King Herod Agrippa began to persecute some believers in the church. This wicked king tied to Rome is now going to turn his attention toward Christians. And he wants to what? Harm them, to stop them, to impede them. And they've been used to prevailing. But suddenly, we're in the middle of a time where it seems like they're not. Verse 2, it says he had the apostle James, John's brother, killed with a sword. This is James, one of the sons of Zebedee, the sons of thunder, a fiery, cantankerous preacher. One of the 12. I mean, if you know anything about a good movie, the main heroes don't die. Well, that's pretend. In real life, this is much more brutal. In real life, this is much more difficult. People say, how come we alone suffer? How come we alone go through difficult times? We don't alone. So they say, how could James be killed? How could that happen? How could one of the 12 die? How could this be? And there's no good answer here. Oh, is it God's will for him to die? I don't believe that at all. But sometimes when there's been success, sometimes when there's promise, sometimes when you're on the destiny to change a region, a nation, a world, sometimes when there's a beginning of an outpouring of glory and power to transform the cosmos, the enemy decides he doesn't want that. Sometimes the enemy starts trying to leverage all he's got to impede, to undermine, to destroy, and hinder. Not because the church or the people have done something wrong, but possibly because they have the power to do everything right. This is just a terrible moment in this early history of the church. It's a challenging moment. They've entered a second act here. They're looking at each other saying, I didn't think this was possible. I didn't think that the enemy of the gospel could actually get anything on us. That's a question we all deal with. Why are there difficult seasons? Why do we suffer? Why does it feel like sometimes the church makes 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back? Why would that happen? What did we do wrong? Well, maybe nothing. I've had all kinds of people from our church come to me a lot over the years, and then something bad happens, and they say, well, what did we do wrong? I've said, nothing necessarily. This is not Hinduism with karma. This is a gospel of grace and power. And certainly we need to do the right things here, but just because something bad happens, just because something doesn't work out, doesn't mean that anybody necessarily did anything. Sometimes this is just the reality of the second act. Sometimes this is just the outworking of us living and the stakes being real and an enemy that wants to hinder, hurt, undermine, and destroy. And some of this is meaningless. It is not understandable. It's not logical. Why do good people suffer? I don't know. I know it's not the heart of God, but it does happen. Verse 3 here, it says, when Herod saw how this pleased the Jewish people, he also arrested Peter. Now, this isn't all the Jewish people. This is the religious Jews that are opposing the church. So he gets this great idea. Everybody was so excited about what he did with James, he's going to take it deeper. Sometimes in a season, the enemy starts moving, and it's almost like the wickedness and the rage and the perversion drives even more and even more and even more. And there's deeper and deeper attempts to destroy and subvert and hinder, and that wickedness encourages more wickedness. The second act is never easy, friends. Verse 4 here, then they imprisoned him. Now you got to keep in mind here, they had just done this to James. And, they expected James to be freed, but somehow he wasn't. So how does it feel now that Peter's been taken? Sometimes things don't go the way we expected, and the question is, how are we going to respond? Sometimes we don't see the breakthrough we've envisioned, and what is going to be our attitude? Sometimes we find ourselves in the second act, and the real challenge is us, who we are, and what we are experiencing and what we're envisioning as we find our way forward, as we wrestle through the challenge. They imprisoned him, placing him under the guard of 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. How would you like to have 16 Roman soldiers on you? Not fun, right? Herod intended to bring Peter out for public trial after the Passover. Herod intends to actually bring destruction on this man. Why? For the goodwill of wicked people. He's playing politics, rising up in this spirit of this attitude, this violence, and this perversion, and all these different things. There's good news in this. Verse 5, it says, while Peter was in prison, the church prayed very earnestly for him. Can I read that again? Because I'm not sure you're catching it. Peter has been caught now, and the church knows we've got to start praying now. They've been praying. We're going to have to pray for him. We're going to have to pray and believe something good. But sometimes it's hard to pray when the last time you prayed, it felt like it didn't work. Anybody understand what I'm saying? Sometimes the battle, sometimes the bloodshed, sometimes the violence, sometimes the casualties of war, sometimes the confusion, and all in the second act starts beating and pushing and pulling, and we start losing a sense of who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do. But the church, they prayed. They prayed earnestly. You know, this is earnest prayer. They went through the heart. They're pressing God. You know, you got to help us here. We've got to have deliverance. We've got to have Peter freed. We've got to have a turnaround. We've got to have this thing moving in the right direction. But sometimes it's hard to pray when you didn't necessarily see what you thought you would before. But they prayed, and they believed the best they could. Verse 6, the night before Peter was placed on trial, he was asleep, fastened with 2 chains between 2 soldiers. That's not quite the middle seat you want, right? Chained between 2 nasty Roman soldiers there. It says that others stood guard at the prison gate. This doesn't look good. This is not a good season. There's no way in the natural he's going to be able to get out of this. But they're praying, and they're believing, and they're hoping. Sometimes when things have gotten hard, it's difficult to start praying and believing for miracles. Sometimes when it's been a more challenging season, it's easy to stop believing for the incredible, for the unfathomable, for the inexplicable. We lose the expectation of that. But I want to tell you here tonight, friends, some of you say, how do we get out of this second act? How do we move forward? How do we get out of this middle that seems to just be chipping away at me and causing me to lose my fervor, causing me to lose all that I'm supposed to be? How? How do I do this? Part of it is we've got to begin to believe for, we've got to expect, we've got to begin to long for the suddenlies of God. Verse 7, it says, suddenly there was a bright light in the cell. See, I want to tell you something. Some things we need to do, some places we need to go, we're just not going to be able to buy our way there, work our way there, or gain enough stature or privilege to actually ever go where we need to go. Some things we're going to need to get out of this mess that our country's in is going to require much more than our wisdom or our knowledge or our past experiences. Some of what World Revival Church needs to move into the next season is going to require new things, new dynamics, and some of that only comes from God. But see, sometimes when we get in the middle of the second act, we lose a sense of the inexplicable. We lose a hope for the miracles. Somebody said, well Pastor J.D., I prayed for the miracle before and it didn't come. It doesn't matter. Well, I believe for this incredible thing, but it didn't quite work out. I get it. But we have to keep praying. We got to keep believing, because part of the way that we get out of this is God himself coming down from heaven. God himself breaking in. God himself coming by glory and power, disrupting, reordering, and making things that are impossible happen. You say, well, I don't know that I believe that anymore. Well, you need it more than ever then. You say, well, I prayed and I'm hurt. I get it. But you've got to pray again. I didn't see what I'd hoped I'd see. Well, you know, part of it here is you're in the second act and it's time to go deep. It's time to learn something about who you are. Suddenly there was a bright light in the cell, and the angel of the Lord stood before Peter. And the angel struck him on the side to awaken him. That's kind of cool to think about. The angel's like kicking him. Come on, wake up. You know, oh. Quick, get up. And as he got up, the chains fell off his wrist. That's so cool. I mean, here they are. You know, they're in this jail cell. Peter's sleeping. I don't know how many of you guys could sleep when you're on the edge of your destruction. But I mean, maybe he had more peace than we do. But I mean, he's sleeping there. This angel kicks him. Get up! Wakes up, and then the chains just fall off him. quick, get up. Get dressed and put on your sandals. Come on, get ready for something. Put on your clothes. Get ready to go marching. Get ready to move out of this mess. And he did. Now put on your coat and follow me, the angel ordered. This is this incredible story. Here's this man who's trapped, who's in jail, really arguably in the same kind of situation that James was in before. James, the son of Zebedee. But in this situation, God steps in with his angels and his power, and he begins to disrupt. He begins to do things that are not possible, things that are not normal, things that are unexpected, things that absolutely will position them to move forward. You say, I don't know if I believe that anymore. Well, it's time for you to get a wake-up call. It's time for you to begin to pray again. It's time for you to understand part of the way we get out of this second act is we've got to have God. We've got to have his power. We've got to have a greater stirring of his Spirit, changing, shifting, reordering, enabling, resourcing, empowering, healing, breaking open doorways that are not possible. Verse 9, so Peter, he left the cell following the angel, but all the time he thought it was a vision. Guess what? Peter didn't believe it either. You know, we read these people, we think, oh man, what great faith. Peter's like, wow, I'm having a super cool dream right now. I'm having like an open vision of something really cool. And suddenly he goes, whoa, this is actually happening. I didn't expect that. They passed the first, the second guard post and came to the iron gate leading to the city. And this opened for them all by itself. So they passed through and started walking down the street. And then the angel suddenly left him. What a moment. This is the very thing that the people back at church had been praying for. They had a prayer meeting, you know, they're praying, they're seeking God, believing for good things. But sometimes it's easier to pray for stuff than to actually believe it, to actually grab hold of it, to actually seize it. And that's sometimes the problem with religious people. We go through the motions, we say the right words, and we even give some sense of belief. But there's a part of us, because of the struggle, because of the challenges, and maybe even the disappointment, that we let down our guards and we stop absolutely contending for amazing things. We stop believing in the improbable. Verse 11, Peter finally came to his senses. It's really true. Whoa! This is bigger than I ever believed could happen. The Lord has sent his angel and saved me from Herod and from what the Jewish leaders had planned to do to me. This angel, the Lord saved me from death. He saved me from the same fate that James had. Verse 12, when he realized this, again, you got to put this, Peter really didn't believe this was going to happen. He had really, in a sense, was accepting the fact that it was over for him. But there was prayer, and there was wonder, and there was expectation, and there was the grace of God, and there's the desire of God to move on mission in this region, and God's desire to do something through a man. And God comes down in power and begins to disrupt, begins to shift, and begins to unleash the improbable. Verse 12, and when Peter realized this, he went to the home of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many were gathered for prayer. What did he do? He went to church. Hey, I got to go find the people that were praying for me. You know? The angel broke it wide open. Man, here I am. I'm out of the jail. Herod's not going to get me. Woohoo. Verse 13 here, he says, he knocked on the door of the gate. A servant girl named Rhoda came to open it. And when she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed that instead of opening the door, she ran back inside. Told everyone, Peter's standing at the door. And so here, Peter's just trying to get it moving. Get to the church. See these great things. And he's left at the door. Sometimes there's a little bit of a hesitation. Could this be real? Could this be true? Verse 15. You're out of your mind, they said to Rhoda. When she insisted, no. You're out of your mind. It must be his angel. They thought maybe the angel that walked with him gave his appearance. It's like, you're just seeing stuff, Rhoda. I know we're praying for Peter to be freed. And we're praying for a miracle. We're praying for this next stage of outpouring and glory to take place in and through our congregation. But no, this ain't happening. Surely Peter's not there. It's funny sometimes. God's trying to do things. God's trying to get us past the second act, moving by his miraculous power. And one of the things hindering us from actually moving out of the second act is our unwillingness to open the door. Unwillingness to apprehend that which he has already positioned. So what we forget in this second act, what we forget in this story, is that we are characters in this play, that we are co-laborers with God. And while God himself is at work in this world, and God himself is moving and bringing miracles and power and great works that just boggle the mind, he has also asked us to partner in this adventure. He has also asked us to be vessels, to be doorkeepers, to be people that bring this down into the lives of people. And what happens so often is that we find ourselves standing back when it's time to open the door. You say, but yeah, I can't be. I've prayed before and it didn't work out. We prayed for this, but the ones that we'd hoped would be delivered were not. We stood for these things, and we're going to keep praying, but we don't really believe, and we're not really willing to apprehend the very things we've prayed about. See, the story of the second act is not about the villain. And it's not necessarily about this wonder and power from the Lord per se. But the second act is about the people who are supposed to change. Who are supposed to, in the midst of the crisis, in the midst of the turmoil, in the midst of the weights, in the midst of the pain, begin to learn who they really are. To learn the depth of character, the depth of heart, that somehow the grit and strength and power and faith that was being birthed in them comes alive. And in the challenge, in the darkness, in the travail, in the losses, in the pain, in the ugliness of the second act, in the ugliness of the middle, in the place that no one wants to be, something happens. Something comes alive. Some of you say, Pastor JD, I can't wait to get out of this second act. Well, maybe the way to get out of it is dependent on you. You say, well, I wish God would do some miracles. How do you know he's not already? I wish that God would do these amazing things. How do you know that's not already underway? Could it be, as we're standing on the precipice of a new day, of a new era, that the problem is that the miracle's standing at the door and we're reluctant to open it? Could it be that we love to pray, we love to posture, we love to give the appearance of faithfulness and devotion and passion and all of that, but we're unwilling to actually reach out our hand and grab hold of the very thing we're praying for? The second act is the very core and centerpiece of a story, because in the second act, the hero finally becomes the hero. In the second act, everything is shown for what it really is. When things get hard and times get difficult, we even lose some things along the way, we get to see who really has it in their heart to stand, who has it in their heart to believe, who has it in their heart to be a hero, because heroes are never heroes until they're tested. We've got to become a people that understand that we are in a season of challenge and difficulty. And part of the way that we're going to get out of this is actually to learn the lessons of this era. It's time to go deep. I mean, you say, I want to do these great things for God. Well, it's time for you to actually embrace the wilderness experience, to embrace the time of testing, to sort out the matters of your heart and who you are, to give to God what is His. It's also a time for us to begin to believe in the inexplicable again, the wonders and the power. To pray that the great things, the great healings, the great works of power would be displayed. Verse 16 says, meanwhile, Peter continued knocking. There's a part of me that thinks that that's actually what's happening right now. There's something knocking at the door, and we're still a little slow at getting to it. There's something knocking on the door, and we're not quite sure we're ready to get there yet. There's something knocking at the door, and we want to wait, thinking maybe it's not yet what we were hoping for. Meanwhile, Peter kept knocking. And here we are, we're in this second act, trying to process, trying to figure this out, trying to walk through this, not realizing that you are the one that needs to change. You're the one that needs to be renewed. You're the one that needs to come alive. You're the one that needs to re-embrace the very things you're praying about. In all the great movies and all the great stories, it's all the same. The hero becomes the hero because in suffering and pain, they discover what really matters. And they stand up for what is true and what is right. And they prevail in the face of darkness and evil. And though some fall to their left and to their right, they stand strong and declare the wonders and beauty and glory of God. We have a nation full of people who've allowed themselves to be sidelined in this second act. We've got a lot of people that are writers have just thrown their books away right now. I said this before, but Tony Morgan says that 65% of Christians in America are no longer attending nor engaging online. There's part of me that wonders if that 65% are really a Christian at all. I don't want to be ugly. This is difficult. The second act is hard, and the bloodshed is real. The pain is real. The suffering is real. But the question is, who are we going to be in the midst of this? How are we going to stand? Who are we going to become? The problem is not God giving us miracles, because I think He's ready to do that. There's plenty of miracles, I think, that we're going to see in this church. Great, incredible things. I think the problem is that we've got people like Rhoda who are unwilling to open the door, unwilling to actually grab hold of the very thing they're praying for. So what are we going to do, guys? Eric, I know you and your team are coming out, but Fady, nobody likes being in the second act. Nobody likes being between the good stuff. Everybody likes the origin stories, and everybody likes the triumph. But what about the part in between? Everybody wants to be the great preachers. Everybody wants to be the great miracle workers. Everybody gets excited about the newly saved and the people that have been freshly baptized in the Holy Spirit. But what about the people in the middle? What about the people in the muck and the mire? What about the people who have seen the dark night? Now the question is, who are they going to be? Who are you going to be? Some of you've walked through some tough things. Walked through difficult times with your marriage, with your money, with your health. Some of you have lost hope over this year. Some of you have wondered, how can I make it? How can I survive? How can I prevail? I want to tell you, there is hope. There is goodness. And I do believe that God is sending us miracles. I do believe we're going to see incredible things that we've never imagined. We've got to begin to pray for that and believe that and expect that. But in the end, it's very important that we learn to stand, to be changed, to be transformed. Hold firmly to that door and pull it open. In verse 16, while Peter was continuing knocking, then they finally opened the door. And they were amazed. I want to suggest to you today, if you'll just reach down and open the door, you'll be amazed at what you see. Pastor JD, I can't. I've been disappointed too many times. Just one more time. Just stand up. Just believe again. Just hope again. Believe in the things that you're actually praying about. Believe in the things that you've decreed. I get it. I get it. You're praying enthusiastically and earnestly. I get it. You're mouthing all the right things. I get it. You're closing your eyes and worshiping. I get it. Please do that. But this is about more than a posture. It's about more than just words. It's about more than just a faith statement. It's about moving past that. In the crucible of the wilderness, in the crucible of the hard season, in that difficult second act, and finding somehow strength and backbone to be the man or woman of God you've been called to be. The world is changing. The world is different. Things are not as they were. It's time for you to arise. It's time for us to become the ones that open the door and that are amazed at the astounding things that God's done. Yes, miracles are on their way. Yes, wonder and glory will be seen. But it will not do us much good if we ourselves, on the end, don't open the door and apprehend the very things that we've been called to see and encounter. Would you stand up with me? We need some angels. We need some crazy, wonderful, beautiful miracles that absolutely disrupt and astound the whole world. We need that. We also need some Rhodas that insist, that's Peter. It's Peter. Let's get this door open. Let's open this up. Because the problem in this age and hour in the church is not the miracles, not the wonder, not the grace, not the power. The problem is on the bottom line. The heroes have not yet arisen. The problem is on the bottom line, we're still wrestling with what we really believe. The reason why we're not seeing more is because we are reluctant to open the door. So today I cry out to you, I speak to you, I call to you. It's time to become who you are. It's time to rise up in the destiny and calling of Jesus Christ. It's time to not only believe in the wonders and power, but it's time to apprehend and to grab hold of the very things that you're called to have. Let it be. Let me pray for you. Father, right now, I got men and women in this place, and some of them are discouraged. Some of them are disappointed. Some of them are wrestling with things. Some of them have had great pain, Lord, I know that. And Father, I pray that somehow you would come with your power, with your grace, with your mercy, and that you would go deep in our hearts and give us a fresh vision of the things that we have prayed for, to give us a boldness, to give us a fire, to give us a confidence, to give us a willingness to stand up once again, to be strong in that difficult second act, to rise up and become the heroes of the third act, to become, to do, and be. Father, I pray in your mighty name that you would give us courage, that you would give us the heart to be brave, that we could rise up and become the people of God. Father, and I just speak blessing and life over this wonderful congregation. Let it be, Lord. Pour out on us in Jesus' mighty name.